Welcome to episode 21 of Bloggers Are Weird. I am your host, DJ Paris, and I can't believe 21 episodes. I quit everything, guys. I don't ever follow through, although I did follow through on my blog last year, and I wrote every day for the year. But other than that, people who know me know my self-discipline is pretty poor. So I'm excited. But the reason I keep going is because you keep listening. I look at my statistics. I make sure that people are interested. And I very much appreciate you continuing to support the show. Also, supporting the sponsors who support the show. You'll hear an advertisement for one here in just a moment. So today on the show, I interview the very, very talented and somebody who I consider to be a true writer, Neil Kramer. He's a friend and also one of the best writers I know. And if you're not following his blog, citizenofthemonth.com, you're missing out. He's fantastic. And this is the longest interview I have done, and I hardly got a word at edgewise, not because Neil is a long, rambling guy, but because he had so many great things to say, and I just sat back and captured it all. So grab some Nutella or whatever your drug of choice is. Mine is not Nutella because I'm not a chick and that stuff is gross, okay? But I know everyone else loves it. So my drug of choice would be a Diet Cherry Coke, which those are gross to most people too. Anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Today's podcast is sponsored by romance-text.com. Looking to reignite the passion in your relationship? You have to check out romance-text.com. This is how to use text messages to bring back the passion and reignite the spark you once had. Now, if you're thinking this sounds cheesy or maybe it's just learning how to send dirty text messages, it's actually not. This program by relationship expert Michael Fiore has been featured in over 200 television and radio shows. This program has a money-back guarantee, is normally $97, but listeners of Bloggers Are Weird get a special price of only $47 for the entire program. By purchasing the program, you help support this show. Visit romance-text.com and get the passion back. Are you still bicoastal? Are you going back and forth?
Maybe, but I'm trying not to.
You don't like LA?
No, I think I like it here better. But still, I got to go where I can make money, so let's see what happens. It's still focused there, most of the industry. You don't have to be less and less unless you're really doing like production, but it's sort of good to be there, just sort of like out of sight, out of mind type of thing.
Yeah. Are you still doing a lot of writing for the industry?
I'm writing something right now. Who knows what's going to happen to it. So let's see what happens. Meaning I'm not like making enough money just through screenwriting to support myself right now.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I imagine it's a very difficult industry to break into.
Well, it's not so much the breaking into; it's also being consistently getting work.
Yeah. Are you doing anything in television or primarily just film?
Right now, I'm just working with some producer on some project. So a lot of it depends on whether he will be able to sell it or not.
Sure. And you don't have any say in how it's pitched or sold, right? You're just kind of you're the talent.
Yeah, sort of. Right. You learn to like know your place to a certain extent.
Sure. Now, do you have to take notes, or do people give you notes as well that you have to incorporate?
And you also learn how to deal with that also,
Is it a lot of untalented people giving you notes on your work, that sort of thing, or are the notes helpful?
I wouldn't say untalented. It's just their, priority is usually not yours, or it's,
sure.
If they happen to, know, actor X, as a possibility, they're gonna like say before I send it to him, make this guy into a black guy, and it's like it's not something you just sort of do, in one day.
Right.
So yeah, I think the problem is like, there's not that much respect for the writer that much.
Sure.
Sure. Well, anyway, I'm speaking with Neil Kramer, who is blogger extraordinaire, photographer, screenwriter. What else do you do? Anything else exciting that I forgot to mention?
Wow. Sometimes I go bowling. I don't know, but I'm not too good at that, you know.
I'm actually quite a good bowler.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
I am. I have my own shoes, and I don't have a ball, but I probably have about a 170 average.
That's really good. I mean, it's not really, really good, but it's good for...
It's good enough, I guess,
right.
for recreational bowling. I can impress a girl if I go on a date.
No, I'm
bowling.
not too strong, so I actually need like a light ball, but the light balls tend to have very small finger holes because it's sort of for kids or like, you know, small Asian women. So I have a problem of I don't fit in anymore into the balls.
Yeah.
You know, I need a light ball, but my fingers are too big for them, so I tend to get a heavier ball, and then I get a lot of, so that my score has gone down progressively because of that.
This sounds like the beginning of a Woody Allen monologue, you know, about not having enough strength and the holes being too small, and sounds like something he would write.
Maybe, but I'm not really like. It wasn't really like. I guess I'm sort of joking, but I'm sort of being true on.
No, I know.
I think if I was going to bowl more often, I would like get a tailor-made ball. But I'm not going to buy a ball. Maybe I don't even know how much is a ball.
I don't even know, but once you have a ball, you're in the club of people who bowl.
I live in New York now, so it's like I've lived in other places maybe where bowling was like a more important activity for fun. So it's like the last thing I want to do now is go bowling, I suppose. I mean, why not? Bowling is fun.
I grew up in the Midwest.
Right, where bowling is very important, right?
It's all we had.
They have like a couple of places in L.A. now that are like these trendy bars. I mean, there might be like a chain across the country now. I forgot what it's called. Lucky Strikes.
Yo, we've got it here in Chicago too.
Right, and it's like that's not really a bowling alley. Where people just want to pick up on each other. So I don't consider to me that's just not a real bowling alley.
Bowling alleys should smell like stale cigarette smoke.
Right.
And just have the stench of failure and depression wafting throughout the place.
You don't go to meet girls at a bowling alley. It's where you go when you don't have a date, with your male friends,
The bowling alley is where dreams go to die.
Right.
Anyway, so do you have something to read for us today?
Yeah. I wrote this recently. I really liked it because it was sort of weird, but I'm not really sure it's going to read very well, but I'll try it anyway.
Well, we'll find out if I get a bunch of angry tweets.
No,
we'll know.
It's not to be angry. It's just sort of I experimented with like playing with writing. Okay, it's called Write What You Know.
Go ahead.
Okay. Sherry called me about this blog post that I emailed her earlier that day. I'd asked her to read it before I published it. You cannot publish this, she said. Why not? She read me the last paragraph of my piece over the phone. Her voice had a tone of shrill mockery. This is in quotations. Reading. Jason walked up to the plate, the baseball bat in his tiny outstretched hand. It was at that moment, the fifth inning of the second game of the Queens County Pee Wee Little League season, that I saw my son become a man. Confident and assured, a true athlete, a mirror image of his old man. That's my son, I wanted to shout. That's my beautiful son. Back to regular. I was so proud of myself when I wrote that passage, sharing a touching moment with my readers, that I was shocked when I heard Sherry's disapproval. You don't like it? I asked, confused. I thought you'd be moved to tears. What the fuck are you talking about? It doesn't matter what I feel, said Sherry. It's not true. You are not a father. You do not have a son. You were never an athlete. It's fiction, I said. And how do I know it's fiction? Well, look at the very end of the piece. In the tiny print it says, this is pure fiction. No, she said. That doesn't change a thing. A blog post has to be true. It cannot be fiction. Look, I know you are jealous of all the mommy and daddy bloggers out there and all the attention they get from the brands, but you can't write a story about being a father. Why not, I asked. Because it opens up a Pandora's box that will allow white people to steal the stories of African Americans and men to write like they understand women, till eventually no one will know what is true and what is false, and society will simply collapse. We must write what we know. But it's fiction, I said. Tolkien didn't know any hobbits. There are no hobbits, she said, but there are real fathers. And you will never know what it means to be a father going to a Little League game. You can never write about it honestly, even in fiction. Write about your own life. Sophia, my ex-wife, Julie, your mother. But it can be frustrating just writing about my own life, I said. When I become too honest about my life, people become all judgmental about my life choices and unfollow me on Facebook. Stop worrying so much about other people, she said. If you are honest and authentic, we accept you for who you are. We want to know the real you and the real events in your life. Is that true, or is that just a platitude? I said, chuckling. Do you really and honestly want me to write a blog post about the time you and Martha gave me those blowjobs inside the It's a Small World ride at Disneyland during the Disney social media weekend? Stop it, you promised me, she said. You can never tell that story, especially since Disney is one of my biggest clients. But it's a true story, right? Of course it's a true story, she said, but you have to maintain some confidentiality. You have to act like a professional, not just blurt everything out. So do you see the bind I'm in? I can't make up stories about being a father because it isn't true. And I can't tell true stories about getting blowjobs by mommy bloggers during Disney social media weekends because it is true. So what else am I left with? Well, you can write a post for my campaign to stop bullying blogathon. I'll never write an anti-bullying post. I like bullying. In fact, bullying was one of my favorite pastimes when I was a teenager. I bullied other kids, and that's the God-honest truth. Neil, she said, I don't believe a word you're saying. You're a liar. No, I'm a writer. No, you're not. A writer writes honestly and authentically, but without malice, and betters the world. You're a fool. The world never improves from your writing. It just grows worse. Oh, actually, I know. I didn't realize how long this was. I'm not going to read the whole thing because now I go for it.
Oh, keep going. I'm fascinated. It's great.
Now it turns to total like fiction of like where I'm arrested for murder, and it just was. I don't know. I really like the fact because this was like, even though it sounds sort of stupid, I'm doing it. It was actually sort of like a personal thing of having a conversation with someone about writing. And about how you need to write what you know. And, as a writer, I thought that was sort of insulting, especially since in the history of – I think because blogging tends to be, at least in the people I know, memoir-ish. I know you write humor, but blogging is at least in most people we know is like memoir. You write about your life.
Right.
That becomes like writing, and that you can only write what your life experience. If you had some, right. and it's sort of insulting to some people if you write about something you don't know about, whatever. But in my view, it's like, I've always been, I didn't come to writing from a memoir point of view. I came, I when I was a kid, I used to like science fiction. The whole idea was you were escape from reality through fiction. You write about robots having sex with hot women. I didn't know about, that I didn't know about that when I was 14. I would never, if I would write about myself, it'd be so boring. So this was sort of I was trying to work on several levels where like what I was saying was true and what I was saying was true was not true. So I like turned it around where I was like writing about a father, but I was actually like talking to this woman like I'm writing a real life story about how she gave me like a blowjob or whatever, which clearly was not true either, but I was writing it like it was true, sort of like playing with the fact that, almost anything you're going to write is never, even if you're writing about a true story, it's never going to be totally true either because you're writing it.
Well, and then there's the whole level of you needing her approval as well. So there's a lot going on in that post.
Right, and then I just went on and wrote like some ridiculous thing where I was clearly fictional, where I got arrested for like murdering someone. It had nothing to do with anything. But I don't know. For some reason, I have more fun. The only reason I read it was because that was like one of the. I think as a blogger, I'm actually getting a little tired of having to be stuck in reality as writing, because being I mean, I see a lot of my friends are like complaining about like what to write about, because they if they want to be stuck, they want to write about their real life. So either they can't write about certain things, like their kids or their marital problems. And at the same time, they are usually like writers or bloggers. And what do you do most of the day? You sit around on your laptop. So there's not much to really, there's not, usually not much happens during the day that's that interesting. So, most of your activities in your mind, you're beating up people, and you're having threesomes. You're doing whatever is in your mind, whatever. And it's like, right. And people are a little bit afraid of the reality. I mean, people are not afraid of Stephen King because he writes, horror stories. You don't think he's a murderer. But I think in like the sort of the blogging world, everyone has become a little bit, because it's so reality based, it becomes sort of boring almost, because you're afraid of exposing stuff about yourself that is not, maybe not positive. But I think one of the ways of doing it is to sort of like hide it in a little bit of a fictional thing. I'm a believer that sometimes you can be more truer by being fictional than being totally bland but real. So, so I had a conversation with someone who's having like, a marital issue, or like I once like, had something going on with, some woman I wanted to write about, but I don't want to, but to actually use her real name, or give too many real details, I just couldn't do it. I'm not a jerk. So I actually spoke to her and asked for like approval to like sort of vaguely write about it, but rather than saying, I saw this woman in, Albuquerque, I say I like drove up to Montreal and saw this woman, and she was a brunette when this woman's a blonde, and theoretically I was lying, by doing that, but at the same time I felt I was able to, be more truer to the real story than just not saying it at all, or, so I don't know. I mean, of course, there's all these like writers who get in trouble because they publish books which are false. So that's different, I suppose, because then you're sort of profiting from what you're doing. But if you're just writing so I mean, every once in a while at the end of a blog post, I actually will say something like, 75% fiction, or, just to give a hint that there's some reality in there, but maybe not totally. So,
well, I have so much respect for your writing, because I really I read very few blogs, and I'm sort of embarrassed to admit that, because so many people read mine who are writers, and I don't give them the respect sadly of often reading their stuff. But I'm a big fan of your writing, because you're a real writer, and the other person who I absolutely wish I could write as well as, other than you, is Tanis from Redneck Mommy.
Right,
and
I've always.
I think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she just blows me away, and then you're in the same vein. So
I've always been a big fan of Tanis. I mean, because she's like she's funny, but she has a lot of heart. There's like so many different types of writing. It's hard to, and everyone comes from a different angle, and sometimes it's like you can't almost really can't. I mean, that's what I sort of like about blogging. Also, it's like it's sort of writing, but it's also a little bit like personality driven because you get to know the person, and it's interesting mix or whatever.
Now, how did you've been blogging since
2005.
Yeah, and how did you decide to start doing that?
I mean, it wasn't like, now I see people have been blogging for since 10, 12 years. I didn't realize people were doing it so early. This was sort of like the end of the first wave. I don't think I was like one of the first ones, but the one, it was still a smaller type of thing. So to me, it was there was no real potential yet for thinking of getting attention through it or money or anything like that. It just seemed sort of more of a goofy type of thing. And it just, to me, it was just sort of like fun that you could open up, it was sort of like a diary a little bit, but you could sort of do it publicly. And it didn't really seem like a big deal, at the time. It would just, it's because it was, people did forums and stuff. It was almost like a bigger version of like writing on a forum, but it was like your own space. So I think I sort of I think if I remember correctly, I actually visualized Andy Rooney, because I always liked those things at the end of 60 Minutes. So it was more sort of like, every couple of days I could just come on and say like, what is it with digital cameras, or something like that, and you write a little like something and put it out there, whatever. And then after a while you made a couple of friends who would do, you have no idea how, it was just weird how people interacted. You met people you didn't really know. And, you started getting a little like weird friendship from people around the country. And it was interesting. There was also people you wouldn't normally meet, people from Oklahoma, and it was just interesting that, how common people, it was like depending, even where you lived, people watched the same TV shows or read the same books or had the same references. So it was interesting.
Well, we should mention your blog if you want to. If you're not familiar with Neil's blog, it's citizenofthemonth.com. You can also follow him on Twitter at Neil Ochka, which is Neil and then Ochka, and also on Facebook. How do they find you on Facebook?
I think I'm Neil Kramer there. That's like the only place where you had to give your real name, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually wish I didn't have Neil Ochka. With again, early on, it was like so, you didn't know what you were doing. It just was like a pet name that my wife at the time had given me. It's like a Russian, like Mamacita. It's like Neil Ochka, so Ochka is like, little Neil, basically. So, but it's caused so much confusion. I get like emails for Neil Ochka, and that's not my real name. And it's just, people have trouble spelling, and now it's clear, like if you want to be smart SEO, you have a comment, everywhere you go, you put your name and you have some very clear, title. Even Citizen of the Month is probably a bad name for a blog because it doesn't really convey anything. But I've got, I've had it for so long already. Why not?
And you've also built up a pretty good-sized community. One of the things I've always admired after I saw you for the first time on the BlogHer Voices of the Year stage last year, reading that piece about the iPhone that went down. Was it the iPhone or was it a MacBook?
No, it wasn't an iPhone.
Yeah, and how it went down, and you had, was it a poem that you had written?
Yeah. That was another example of where it was partly true and partly fictionalized. And, like you, I started out more like you. Even this, I tried to be sort of humorous. I like funny stuff, and outside of blogging, I like to write funny things. And But I think blogging became something more. I didn't in my first year. I think it was either my first year or the second. I think it was actually the very first year I started blogging. My father died, and I started like writing. That was a big transition. It was like all of a sudden I was like I said, starting out just like funny things, like pop culture. Like isn't Survivor really stupid this year? And then all of a sudden, my father died. I noticed other people had started to, be a little bit more personal. And that really shifted, that all of a sudden you had like a support group of people like, this is before Twitter. So, but it was more like you would write a blog post and people would write on there, I feel so bad, and people would mail you things. And then you started writing about your personal feelings about it. And whether that took me down the wrong road or not, in a way, I think it did, because blogging became less about writing for me than almost like personal therapy, connecting with people, which I think worked for like 2 or 3 years. And now I sort of feel stuck in it, because now it seems like old already, where I think when I was writing for an audience of like 20 people back then, and you saw them all as friends. And now like blogging is, everyone's moved to Facebook. So now if someone dies, your family members, you'd more likely go to Facebook or Twitter than to your blog and write about it. So it was almost like your blog was your only way of connecting with people, and some of the steam is taken away because of that,
Yeah, and I like how you've on Facebook really cultivated a community of other writers who you ask the tough questions about writing, and you bring up topics that in my other groups that I'm in on Facebook with a bunch of other bloggers, it's a little bit more surface driven. And with yours, it's really specifically about writing.
But that's another problem and issue is like, and it's something I'm torn between. I authentically like talking to people and connecting with people, and at the same time you want to be known as a writer and get attention to yourself and make a living through writing. So, I've had people tell me like you're blowing your good stuff on Facebook, by talking there or whatever. Like, why don't you just put all this stuff on your blog and keep it, So it's a little, to me, I'm like a little bit at a confused point, in blogging, because I really, because I've had certain things that I've had, in the last 6 years since blogging, I've had like, my father died, I had a divorce, I had like her, had both her parents died at a certain point. There was like a cancer scare with her. So like my blog became like a community, it's like, talking about Tanis, she was like, when like my wife's mother passed away, I wasn't really sure. Actually, the first person Twitter was already here. Because I know she's good at handling things. I basically DM'd someone I never met before, and then I said I have an issue. What do you think I should do next? So it became like a support network. And but now but at the same time, blogging is like a business. So how, it doesn't have to be, but it is for a lot of people. So I get a little confused on how to use it best.
Well, for me,
for you personally, should I be connecting with you as like a person, as a writer, or as someone who could potentially be, a reader of me? So it's like a weird, you get into all these weird friendships because, it's partly, I'm sort of saying it's like partly friendship, but also partly, you need each other to network and things like that. You don't get the real world, when you make a friend, in in the real world, you don't like ask him to like read your blog post, really, you know.
Yeah, it's one of those things. What's worked for me is just staying out of the whole light at the end of the tunnel. I don't see for me becoming, getting book deals. I don't see that happen. If it happens, that's another issue, or that's another nice side effect of writing. But I don't particularly care so much, which is what I've learned, because it's not my main source of income. I mean, it generates a little bit of money for me every month, but not enough. And if I needed it to pay the mortgage, well, then I'd be in really rough shape, and I'd have to make all sorts of accommodations. I'd have to take on sponsors and things like that. But which maybe is possible. I don't know. But it's for me, I just go, when I have found there's nothing to write about, and I write about what, as you mentioned, is going on internally, I find that, and I'm authentic and honest and vulnerable. And I just wrote about this the other day. I found that my readers, or the people who read my blog, I don't like to call them my readers, but people who read my blog tend to respond the most positively to. So I just, I think with you, that's what you do. You just write authentically, and I think that's why you've built such a nice community of people who respect you. At least that's what I see.
Well, thank you. I probably get more from them than I do from vice versa. I mean, we're both in this little forum recently, and one of the main conversations we talk about is how to juggle knowing so many people and write. In this group we're in, there's a lot of writers, right? And it's like, writing requires you to like sit by yourself at the computer and just sort of like write, right? It's like sort of a lonely profession in a way. And at the same time, there's always the call of social media where like 1,000 interesting, fun people with a lot of ideas and talking, and it's like, how to balance, what you need to do for your own self and I guess that social aspect of it.
Yeah, it's funny. I just operate out of a very simple assumption whenever I meet other bloggers. Somebody like a Tanis who I've met her, but I've direct messaged her a bunch on Twitter. We've gone back and forth a few times, but I just assume she doesn't read my stuff. And I assume nobody reads my stuff, which I know isn't true because I look at my stats, but I assume nobody reads it, and then I'm never disappointed. When people go, oh, I don't know your stuff. Oh, okay, I didn't expect you to.
I'm not even talking about getting people to read. I mean, I'm more talking about the fact that actually there's a certain. I mean, maybe I'm moving more to like social media than blog, which I always tend to talk about. I think I have like a mild addiction to it. I think a lot of people do, where it's on 24 hours a day, and it's like the more people the more. I mean, going back to the old days of blogging, there was a community, but it was like you had to write a blog post to connect with them. It was like you had to write something. It was very slow. It was almost, back then people made fun of it as like being sort of like stupid, but now it almost seems like great literature. You had to like almost write a blog post and then wait for someone to read it, and you would comment back. Now if I wanted to talk to you, it's like, almost everyone is always online all the time, even if they're like their cell phones are like, just connected to Facebook. So like I can just go on any time and find like 90% of the people I want and just say like, hey, how you doing? I have a question or whatever. So it's almost like everyone's so available. It's like it takes away that need to write, unless you have an internal core that you really need to write something. And the way you have to like, the more I shut off my computer and unplug my router, the better I write.
Yeah, me too. Because for me, I'm like a Twitter junkie.
Right.
I'm coming up on, I don't know, about 60,000 followers, and it's one of those things where sometimes people go, "Wow, that's impressive," and I said, here's what Twitter does for me. It enables me to write something cute in 140 characters, and I'll get 20 responses, and that will satisfy me, and then I won't write a real post.
Right.
You know? And so I use it as I like Twitter. It's fun, but I use it as, I thought of something clever. I'm going to write it, and I'm going to get a bunch of laughs, and then I'm going to not want to feel the need to actually write something of substance. And so I like Twitter. I always say Twitter is great for when you feel lonely, because it will give you, it's not real human interaction, but it's pretty close, and you can definitely you're never alone when you have Twitter.
But you have to be careful of that danger, and I know that's affected me also, where it's like if it becomes hard to sit by yourself without without turning on Twitter, then there's a problem, because that's it's something. I have a feeling that in the next 5 or 10 years or whatever, there's going to be, maybe there are already internet anonymous groups. Because it just seems, this is like the closest. I've never really had a problem with drinking or smoking or anything like that. But talking about writing what I can't write what being an alcoholic would be like. But I think by my experience with Twitter, I could sort of vaguely understand where you're compelled. It's there are days I'll start writing. I want to write something. I'll turn off I actually unplug my router just so I can focus on writing. And then after a half hour, I would look over to my phone. It was my phone is calling me. It's maybe I should just go on Twitter for a second to see if anyone DM'd me, and it's crazy. It's really almost a little bit of an addiction that that someone's going to say something you're going to miss out, or you're going to it's and you need to fight that to a certain extent. That's not that important in the long run.
No, every joke I've ever told on Twitter is forgotten.
Right.
It doesn't exist. It's kind of like that meditation thing. You sit down for 5 minutes, you try to meditate, and then you go, I could go do something else, and it's just too difficult to sit there in your own thoughts. And when we have instant feedback, we have instant ways to communicate.
Well, how do you deal with? Since I've always been sort of curious when someone who actually has a lot of followers. I guess you're supposed to be interviewing me, not me, you. But
no.
But I don't have as. I don't even remember what I have. But I'm definitely following by at least 3,000 people.
Right.
And I don't want to. I've never felt comfortable just because I'm into this community being just a broadcaster. My aim is not to just be there and write and then get comments back. I actually enjoy reading what other people write also. And it's the more it's sometimes people go to me and say, I really want to have more followers and stuff like that. And it's my first instinct is why? Unless you're doing it unless you really are trying to sell a book or something like that, where you can sell yourself as having a lot of followers because they like that as a platform. I would think the more followers you get, the more of a pain in the ass it is, because now there's more people who you feel you need to follow. So I don't know how you feel, but it's if I get 20 comments on some tweet I write, I feel almost obligated to now at least go check out what they're thinking or doing, and then it becomes a never-ending thing of writing stuff and listening to other people rather than sitting down with your own thoughts.
It's weird. I had somebody recently write me publicly on Twitter, not just direct message, saying, "You never respond to me," and I comment all the time on your tweets.
Right.
And I didn't even recognize the screen name. I didn't know who this person was, and I said, and I felt compelled to write back. And I said, I'm really sorry. Just so you know, I never respond to anybody's replies to me. But it's not a rule I have. I'm just too busy. And I'm not that popular, but I have a day job. I don't respond to hardly any of the comments on my blog. And that's really where would like to spend my time. I know you do that.
No,
I'm
I'm very bad with responding on the. I actually don't, and I've had messages like that all the time myself, and it's like the same exact thing, But it's like, but I understand it. It's like whatever. I mean, I have the same feelings the other way around. I mean, I hate sort of like. I hate like, going to someone, particularly someone who's like, you hold in esteem or like, some novelist or someone, and you like write a comment to them and they just sort of like don't respond to you at all. It's like, I mean, if I feel that way, then I understand. I mean, you're right. It's crazy when someone would go to you and say like, you never comment back. But
I can understand that frustration.
Right.
And But it's people take it so personally, and it's funny because, and I know this must happen to you. It happens to me, and I probably have similar traffic. I got 3 of these last week, which is unusual for me. But I got 3 pretty long emails from people I didn't know saying stuff about, hey, can you help me? I got a blogging question, or I don't remember even what they asked, but. They wrote these long emails, and then I feel compelled to write back because I want to help in whatever way I can, but I don't have the time, and so it's like if I just write back 2 sentences like, hey, thanks for writing me, and I'm sorry I can't help you, or here's a couple of quick thoughts. Well, they just wrote 1,000 words or something, really long to me, and I'm writing back 50. It's like that's not what I want to give to them.
Yeah,
I want to give
well, that's why blogging to me is a very confusing place because if it's not really total, it's not just writing. I mean, let's say like going back to Stephen King, when like Stephen King, he writes a novel, or whatever. It's like you're not gonna like, send him an email and really expect him to write you back, or if you're gonna go see a signing of him at a bookstore. He's going to like go with you to dinner, but because blogging is so, and everyone's on social media, it's so personal that it's in a way, the system is so personal that people get into you as a person that it's like, there's more disappointment when you find out that like the person who's like chatting with you every day, on Twitter, when you actually meet them, is just sort of like walking by. I mean, I always found BlogHer a little like very frustrating because that's exactly what happens. It's like, it's you. I mean, it's not like I don't see it as like a negative. I mean, it's a little negative, but just it's not like completely real.
Right.
So I mean, I've sort of. Gone in an elevator, in a BlogHer thing with someone who like I've talked to for like 3 years, and we almost like, just sort of like nodded at each other because it was just, it was sort of awkward, or, or you didn't really know what to talk about other than. So I don't know actually what I'm saying. It's like I'm a little torn about the fact. You can see this is like a running thread that I have, the fact that like I like people and I like the community aspect of it. At the same time, it's like you almost want it to be like regular writing where you just sort of like write your novel and like give it out there. And, and a lot of bloggers are doing that now. I know a couple of bloggers who cut off their comments. They never go on social media. They just use their blog almost like they're writing a column. So they cut themselves away from the social aspect, and they just either people like their writing or they don't, and that's good for them. But if you get into the social aspect, it becomes more confusing because it's like, is this my friend? I've been complaining a lot lately about all the commercial aspects of it. It's like all of a sudden, your friend on, Instagram is not putting up pictures anymore of their babies or anything like that. They're putting up like an advertisement for their giveaway. It's like, to me, it's like almost, you're going to a friend's house for dinner and you find out it's like a Tupperware party,
Yeah, I got that. I had the experience at BlogHer where last year, which was my first year, where I I knew like 3 people going, and one was Hannes, and I didn't know she was a big deal until I found out she was speaking.
Right.
I didn't know anything about her, and somehow I had befriended her a little bit, and then a few other people, and I wasn't really able to spend time with any of them because they were too busy, and I took it so personally, like, what? Oh, I guess they're not really my friends. They, or I didn't begrudge them. I just thought, oh, I guess they're not. The boundaries were so gray that I thought, well, of course they're going to want to hang out with me and spend time. But the reality of it was they were too busy, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I just assumed I would have direct access to them.
Right.
And,
well, you learn. I mean, the longer you do it, the more like BlogHer. It almost has like, 2 categories: is the people who are like going there to learn and to network, and then there's more like the longer term people who are like actually speaking there and stuff like that. And they, it's like almost like a job already. I know last time I read there once and I did a session, and it was just like I was running around half the time. It was, and I probably seemed rude to other people, and it wasn't like I wouldn't rather just like hang out and like talk to people. It's just sort of like, you begin to have responsibilities and it's not fun anymore. So, and also it's like everyone thinks that that it's like a little bit cliquish. I mean, maybe it is a little bit at times, but usually people are just seeing each other for the first time, once a year. So, it's like usually if you're seeing someone for the first, usually you want to hang out with like some guy for 3 years and someone you don't really know. Right. But the person who's there for the first time is all excited about meeting you. So, yeah. So, I mean, that's why there's always a lot of, gossiping about, Susie's a bitch, doesn't talk, because it's like it's so personal, I mean, in a way, I'm trying to get more back into like the writing aspect of it rather than like focus on the social aspect of it, which is fun and that's how people, whatever you're going to do, there's always going to be a social aspect of it,
Well, if you want to meet Neil or myself, we will both be at BlogHer this year in Chicago, and we're actually really easy to find because we're the only guys there, and we're very approachable, and we love. I mean, I can't speak for you, but I have a suspicion you like meeting people because I've seen you at conferences, and
that's interesting to other creative people, doing different things.
Yeah. Well, is there any advice you have for bloggers? Because majority of the people that listen to this are, in fact, writers who might be starting out in their blog. As somebody who I consider a real writer, unlike me, who is just somebody who I like my writing, but I certainly am not a real writer. What advice do you have for people who are blogging?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think because it's such on one hand, write what you want, and just be yourself. On the other hand, it's like a very crowded marketplace now. I mean, I don't marketplace even if you don't make money because there's so many blogs and like every magazine is like turning into a blog itself, So it used to be, you were just competing with other bloggers. Now, like New York Times reporters are bloggers. So it's like, what would distinguish you? Why would people want to read you? So I think it's very important to have like a specific voice, even if you're writing about the same things as everyone else. I think what sets you apart is like that, people should be able to read your posts and say, hey, that's like, that's Joe's writing. And I mean, that's sort of pretty obvious, but I think it's sort of important. I mean, I read a lot of stuff now and everyone's just sort of like imitating each other. And it's sort of boring, to just everyone's writing like the same, like article. I mean, I think people are telling them to like, well, you need to like follow the trends of what's out there. But it's like, who wants to read you when I could read the same thing from like, the New York Times, who's probably going to write it better and in a better way. So it's like, if I'm going to read you writing, something about some, Kim Kardashian or whatever you're going to write about, make sure that you write it as like only you could write it.
Well, I love when, I'm sure you get these too, I get these publicists that say, hey, there's this new show on HBO, and here's all these, aren't those great? And they go, if you want to write about it, that'd be great. And I go, like, it's so, in a way, it's sort of offensive to me. Obviously, they're sending that out to a million people.
Exactly, and they're not paying you either, so,
Oh, no, not only are they not paying you, they've never read your blog.
Right.
And so
I don't know if you got this because I spoke at the BlogHer last year, but it's like I must be in some computer as a mom blogger.
Saying you get tons of
Well, I mean,
stuff
like, I love your blog. As you know, baby strollers are all in vogue this year. I'm sure you'd love to write about. It's like, okay, not only does it prove that they are just sending it out, it's like they never really read my blog. They just have me on some list as like a mom with a 1-year-old.
Well, so basically, what I tell people, and it sounds like what you're telling people, is put your head down, turn off the router, and write, and ultimately find your voice. And, we already have a Deuce, we've got a BlogS, we've got Scary Mommy, we've got they're already themselves. You need to find yourself.
Yeah, and it's more important writing. I mean, people still think that being on social media, you're going to like network, and that's the most important thing. But really, people follow each other because they're they write something interesting. So I think even if you want to do it socially, it's important to have good material or write interesting stuff. That just being on Twitter is not enough to just sort of. I'm not that impressed even with like people who are voted like top 10 funniest person on Twitter. So what,
What I do for me is I know this is going to sound like I'm a huge blowhard, but what I do is I just write for myself in the sense of I write something that makes me laugh, and I just assume if it makes me laugh, other people, and I don't always go for the laugh, but in fact, I more often than not don't go for the laugh. But if I write something, the next day I often just kind of forget what did I write about last night? I don't remember, and I go back and I read it and I go, that's something I want to read, and I don't announce it to the world, but I sit there on the subway on the way to work, I read what I wrote, and I go, wow, that was good. And I don't, and that's, I think, for me, is if you can get to a place, and that doesn't always happen. Sometimes I go, oh, that was terrible. I could have rewritten that. But sometimes I sit there and I go, wow, that, I'm really proud of that.
Yeah.
And sometimes
who else could you write for, really? I mean, you never know.
And sometimes, and sometimes there's 2 comments, and other times there's 30. And it could be the best thing you ever wrote with 2 comments, or 0.
The comments should not. People should not think of the worst posts get the most comments usually for some reason.
Absolutely.
Because it's just sort of, if it's a really touching post, then people are going to be like touched, whatever. They're not going to know what to write. So exactly. I don't let comments be the barometer of anything.
No, it is a little disappointing though. I still have a little bit of attachment to that comments equal good. So I'm trying to untangle that. But for the most part, I just I appreciate comments. But you're right.
Maybe
I think
humor. I guess if you're trying to be like funny and get out there, humor is a different type of thing where you expect feedback. But, if you're going to write like some heartfelt post, like my dog just died or whatever, it's like you're not going to get, people going, great, but if there's some posts people just sort of love, I just lost, 10 pounds. Everyone's going to go like, yeah, go for it. People right. Like that sort of like Rocky story, even in a blog post. So, but it's not that satisfying to just sort of write stuff for the crowd,
Well, let's, we're coming up on about an hour here. So
okay.
We'll wrap it up. You have any final thoughts? Oh, lastly, if you want to see some great photography, follow Neil on Instagram. How would they find you?
I'm just Neil Kramer on Instagram.
And spell that again for us?
NeilOchka.
And if you want to follow his blog, it's citizenofthemonth.com. He puts a lot of his photography in there, as well as his writing, fiction and nonfiction. And follow him with the same handle, Neil Ochka or at Neil Ochka Twitter, and then search Neil Kramer for Facebook. And any final thoughts? Any last words?
Just, if you're into, being creative, just do it and don't. A lot of people say they're not writers and not photographers, but modern days is like everyone is, because you have the tools to do it and no one's going to stop you. So even if it's still like not up to professional standards, you just keep on doing it and it gets better. Talk about the photography. It's like I never took a camera really at all. I had the camera on the phone. I just spent like 2 years, and just by doing it over and over again, it got better. So the same thing with writing. It's like you just you'd be surprised. Like I said, I've been doing this a long time. I know people who weren't writers or were just sort of like majors of math. They just started blogging, and now they're like just by doing it for like 6 years, they're now like write beautiful posts, and some of them are writing books.
Yeah, it's
like exercise. If you do it all the time, you get better at it.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Neil, I really appreciate your time, and thanks for speaking to our audience.
Okay.
And please follow him on Instagram, read his blog, and hopefully we'll be able to go to a theater at some point and see some of your.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
okay.
I always like to end this with saying, say goodbye, Neil.
Okay. Goodbye, and thank you.